They named it 3I/ATLAS because numbers are easier to say than fear. Third interstellar object, a smudge slipping in from nowhere, throwing a weak reflection to the telescopes, and then coasting as if it had all the time in the universe. On the feeds, it looked like a dull pearl with frost burns. In the morning shows it was dead, in the weekend specials dormant, and in 1,000 captions, it was a cosmic tourist just passing through. Helen Morrow watched it from a control room that hummed like an old refrigerator. The screen was a wall-sized night with a single white mote dragging pixel light behind it. She knew the numbers by heart. Velocity, angle, the lazy glide that didn't match the models. She knew the smell of the room, a cocktail of burnt dust and overworked fans, and the way it got quiet in a way machinery shouldn't, like the building was listening. "It's not dead," she said. Jamal, all elbows and new credentials, swiveled toward her. "Then what is it?" "A decision," she said, because the word arrived and felt cold and right on her tongue. They didn't have long to pretend otherwise. The first calls came in dressed as jokes. A shrimper off New Jersey netted blue crabs with shells as thin as tissue and arranged like petals, their legs tucked in neat, almost floral arcs. In Maine, a deer delivered fawns with eyes like sodium lamps. In Ohio, a house cat had a litter of 4, 3 fuzz-bright kittens and one that watched without blinking. Photos bounced through the algorithm and picked up the usual static of irony. Then the secure lines lit. The CDC called the lab. The Department of Defense called the university director, who still had Helen's number in his phone, marked with 2 stars and "Do not lose." A colonel with a carved face and unhelpful calm showed up in a suit that didn't want to be worn. He introduced himself with a last name he didn't repeat and a handshake that tried to measure her pulse. "Dr. Morrow, your team is requisitioned to Roosevelt Island. Airlift in 30." "What's on Roosevelt Island?" Jamal asked. "Containment," the colonel said, "and something you'll tell me how to kill." The Roosevelt Island Biocontainment Facility had been a ribbon-cutting joke when it opened. Pandemic chic, a photo op with glossy pamphlets. As a helicopter thumped them down onto the pad, it looked like a square of gray wedged between river and skyline, too neat for the job. Inside it was all clean lines, badge readers, the smell of antiseptic, and the steadier scent of fear. The colonel marched them through 4 doors that sighed and sealed behind them and into a room where a silver coffin hissed cold against a table. "We intercepted a fragment," the colonel said. "Broke off 2 days ago, altered trajectory, decelerated," he let the word hang, "landed near a dairy farm north of Albany. The ground where it fell turned unusual." A pause. "We collected what we could." He nodded at the coffin. A tech with careful hands cracked the lid. Argon vapor poured out like a tired ghost. On a bed of inert gas lay the shard. Not stone, not ice. It held the room's light the way a spiderweb holds dew, gathering it and moving it around, not reflecting so much as rearranging. Its surface looked still until you let your eyes soften, and then you could see it shift a hair at the edges like a sleeping animal's breath under a blanket. Jamal leaned in. The colonel grunted. Liza, pale and methodical, bumped the temperature down another 2 degrees. Paxton, gray-templed and neat to a fault, started reading numbers out loud, grounding himself in a litany. Helen didn't touch it. She wanted to. The hunger sat in her palm bones. "It's not passive," she said. "It's behaving." He gave her a look that asked for something useful. "Alive? Show me a better word." They nested it in the strongest box the facility had, layer upon layer of engineered common sense. They chilled the chamber until winter would have cracked. They piped in an inert mix and watched it settle. They bathed the shard with radio waves across the spectrum, because that is what you do when you don't know what you are talking to. It drank and changed nothing obvious. That night, Helen dreamt the ocean had teeth. She woke with the impression of a tide inside her jaw. On the second day, the mice in containment B stopped sleeping. Their tiny hearts drummed out Morse through the plastic. Their eyes filmed in a way the vet techs didn't have a word for. In containment C, the plants uncurled against their lids, stems bending not toward the sun lamps, but away from them, bracing like elbows on a crowded train. Liza wrote quietly in the log, "Phototropism altered," and looked at the overhead panels as if expecting them to answer back. The colonel had a way of standing at thresholds that made every room feel smaller. He hovered while Helen and Paxton fought the impulse to be reassuring. "We have reporters calling Roosevelt Hospital about babies born with webbing," he said. "We have game wardens sending us pictures of fish that look like—" He groped for a word and refused to say monster. "Wrong. And I have a budget meeting where I'm supposed to pretend it's all a cluster of hoaxes." "It's not a hoax," Paxton said, and it sounded like an apology. They sequenced what they could. Soil from the farm, shed hairs from the deer, a swab from the mouth of the blue crab that didn't want to be alive. The readouts swung between nonsense and too much sense, equations that solved themselves into forms and then widened into gaps big enough to fall through. Paxton wrote the same 3 symbols on the board, circled them, erased them, wrote them again. Jamal caught himself humming under his breath, a lullaby he didn't recognize. The shard changed shape that afternoon, not a dramatic flex, nothing the cameras would catch in real time, just the slow, exact redrawing of a curve until the light inside it flowed with less waste. Helen felt the change in her teeth before she saw it in the data. She had the sudden certainty that if she pressed her ear to the chamber glass, she would hear not a noise, but an instruction in a language that had been sitting inside her bones since bones learned to be hard. She didn't tell anyone that. She checked seals, recalibrated the spectrometer, nodded at Liza's notes, and waited for someone else to say it first. In the cafeteria, she poured coffee with hands that wanted to shake and didn't, and watched a soldier on break stir his oatmeal so slowly the steam seemed to hang, and watch him back. Outside the facility, the city kept its rhythm, because that's what New York does. The mayor stood in front of a flag and said words that tasted of sleep deprivation. Nurses posted photos of faces marked by elastic lines. A jogger in a red windbreaker kept pace along the river and didn't look at the water, which had started to slap the bulkhead in something like time. By the third day, the word mutation had taken the air out of the press room. It was a familiar blanket everyone knew how to pull up to their chins. It did not fit what Helen saw through the microscope. Cells didn't drift so cleanly toward symmetry by accident. Plates didn't arrange themselves into spirals like this without a plan. Slices of raccoon brain, don't think about the guard, don't think about the way the animal had caught the baton, showed networks knitting with an economy that felt like admiration. It didn't look like a disease, it looked like an edit. A template, Paxton said. He'd been up for 30 hours and was very gentle with the word. An imposition, Helen said, not gentle at all. The colonel brought a new rule in a box of single-use phones. No external air through non-scrub ductwork, he said. Full seal, unless you're in suits. He kept his voice steady, and his eyes were tired in a way that didn't match his face. My men are reporting animals approaching perimeters and just watching. We've all seen raccoons. This isn't that. He didn't mention that a soldier at the north gate had stood with his palm resting on the fence for 5 minutes, eyes closed as if listening for the train. They put more cameras on the shard. They gave it nothing but what they couldn't help giving: heat leak, vibration, attention. It brightened on the monitors in a way that made no numerical sense. No emission spike, no extra wattage, just more present. Jamal aimed a radio at it and got back a hiss that made his eyes water with nostalgia for a sound he'd never heard. Liza held her breath a lot without noticing. Paxton started to say "we" and didn't mean the team. The fourth day began with rain and ended with an email. Somewhere in Queens, a hospital posted a video of a delivery room where nurses moved like people who had rehearsed this emergency forever. The camera didn't show the child, only the cord, braided neatly into a loop with 2 clean knots. Someone added a caption, "Miracle." Under it, the comments split into faith and running shoes. Helen watched the clip exactly once and closed her eyes. The shape of the loop stood behind her eyelids like a stain. "Do we tell them?" Jamal asked. He had the look of a man who knows the answer and wants the rule to be otherwise. "We tell them what we can prove," Paxton said, automatic. "What can we prove?" Liza asked softly, as if an answer might break. "That it's alive," Helen said, and the room tilted toward her. She realized she had been saving the sentence like candy, putting off the moment so she could enjoy the ache of wanting to say it. It's not a rock. It's not a machine the way we mean that word. It's a process that uses objects. It's here, and it's using us already. "Then what do we call it?" Jamal asked. No one spoke. The word was there, old and simple and heavy. Helen did not say it. She put a dot on the corner of her paper with the pen and watched the dot soak outward into the fibers in a neat circle. The pen bled with such self-control that she felt, stupidly, less alone. That night, the building breathed. They all heard it and didn't say so. The sound came up through steel, gentle, like a bar elevator, like a lung under a sleeping dog. The pressure changed in the hallways with a pattern Helen's body recognized a step before her mind did. She woke at 2 from a nap she hadn't meant to take, heart jogging, mouth dry, and knew the shard had changed again. Security footage from the perimeter picked up a coyote on the bike path, staring through the fence with eyes like polished glass. The animal didn't move for 6 minutes. A guard approached with a baton and then stopped and put his hand to the chain link. For 12 seconds, the man and the animal stood like that, palm to wire, eye to eye. The coyote blinked just once and turned away. The guard rubbed his hand as if it tingled. By dawn, the sky looked newly washed and wrong. The light came in a little too clean, as if the city had been wiped with a cloth. Helicopters thumped a tired pulse over the water. A river barge moved downstream and left a wake that folded itself with perfect corners. The colonel convened them in the conference room with the window that pretended to be a view and was really a screen. He didn't sit. "Command is drafting an urban protocol," he said. He didn't use the word quarantine. "You'll get it when I do. In the meantime, we tighten. No outside air that isn't baked. full suits for everything beyond the second ring. We do not touch anything with skin. Too late, Jamal muttered, and then apologized to the table. Helen didn't disagree. In the lab, she bent over a slide and watched a smear of human blood reorganize itself at the edges into threads that braided and unbraided without leaving residue. The threads did not look ambitious. They looked efficient. They looked like someone had finally found a better way to draw a circle. She pulled back and realized she had been holding her breath again. When she looked up, the glass of the shard's chamber caught her eye the way a mirror does when you see yourself at an unexpected angle. The shard sat very still. Inside it, a glimmer rippled and settled, the way a thought does when it decides to become a belief. Out in the city, the morning rush happened because habit is a machine. People went to work. Kids with two big backpacks leaned into the wind. On a subway platform, a busker played a saxophone solo. So sweet a knot of commuters missed their train, then another train, and stood blinking as if waking. On the same platform, a man coughed, a soft, embarrassed cough, like someone who forgot the punchline. 3 people looked up with 2 slow smiles and then looked away. Helen found herself writing a list on the back of an old protocol sheet. Shrimp, deer, cat, raccoon, fish, cord. She added mice insomnia, plant bracing, coyote eye contact, human blood knitting. At the bottom, she wrote the word contact and crossed it out. Under it, she wrote frequency. Under that, inside. She did not look over her shoulder when she underlined the last word twice. At noon, a tech in the next lab over dropped a tray and didn't flinch when it shattered. He stared at the pieces as if they were arranging themselves into a better shape. He seemed surprised when they didn't. Liza found Helen in the doorway and stood too close, distracted, like someone trying to remember the dream she'd just been in. "Do you ever hear music in the vents?" she asked. "No," Helen said, and wanted it to be true. They tightened seals. They checked each other's suit zippers with the tenderness of bad times. The shard did not give them a spike or a flare or any of the drama data likes to use when it wants you to pay attention. It simply continued, and the continuation spread. Quiet, relentless, correct. By evening, the facility felt like a lung in a chest too small for it. The air was scrubbed raw. The light seemed brighter for no good reason. Helen stood alone in the observation corridor outside the shard's chamber and pressed her palm to the glass, not touching, only sharing heat across a hair of distance. She could feel the room on the other side as clearly as if she had stepped into it. Colder than it should be, drier, patient. She thought of how the press liked to talk about thresholds. The moment before this becomes that. The line that you cross. She had the unsettled sense that the threshold had not been a line at all, but a field, and they had been walking through it for days, talking, measuring, doing what competent people do while the ground learned their weight. Down the hall, a door sighed. Somewhere, a mouse scratched and then stopped. On the screen above the chamber, a graph smoothed itself into a quiet curve. The sky over the river went dim with the speed of a lid closing. The city lights came on in their neat grid, more orderly than anyone remembered. From the pad, a helicopter groaned awake for another sweep. It didn't comfort her. Helen stood there until the room's hum braided into her pulse, and the glass under her palm reflected a pale oval that could have been her face or the shards. She took her hand away, and the warmth she'd left behind cooled fast, erasing itself with the efficiency of a well-kept secret. The night settled in, too quiet for a city. Somewhere outside, sirens, then none. On the lab speakers, the automated voice labeled the hour and told them to rest. No one did. In the chamber, the shards shifted, almost not at all, just enough for the light inside to find a lower energy state. It looked like a body deciding on a better way to breathe. Helen closed her eyes and listened to the building. It was listening back. At dawn, the facility's hum settled into a steadier key, as if the building had finally matched its breath to the shards. The air felt thinner, cleaned past comfort. Helen woke from a shallow doze at her desk with the sensation that someone had placed a warm coin under her tongue. When she swallowed, the taste stayed. The colonel gathered them in the conference room with the fake window. His voice had lost the hard edges. It arrived sanded down by fatigue. "Clean sweep is live," he said. "Shelter in place for Manhattan, full mass guidance nationwide. Bridges restricted to emergency. We'll get a formal order set after the governor stopped floor fighting. Until then, no outside air, full suits beyond second ring, and if a door isn't rated for pressure, you don't open it." On the screen, the shard's chamber telemetry was a forest of steady lines. No spikes, no alerts, nothing you could print on a slide and call a victory. Helen watched the temperature ease up 1/10 of a degree and stay there, not drift, hold, like the object had decided to keep it. Jamal rubbed his eyes. "Why does it feel quieter with more helicopters?" "Because the noise outside is ours," Liza said, voice small. "Whatever's in here isn't." They filed back to the lab with a careful choreography of people trying to keep a rhythm they didn't choose. Paxton was already at the console, tie abandoned, hair smudged with the day. He nudged the gain on the radio array an 1/8 turn. The speakers offered a speckled hiss. He tuned again. The hiss thickened, not louder, denser, like rain seen from far off. Helen braced her palms on the console. The metal carried a vibration her instruments didn't acknowledge. It rose through her wrists, into the small bones, and up to the hinge of her jaw. Not pain, a shape, the taste of copper, the memory of an elevator starting down. "Do you feel that?" she asked. Jamal's pupils had blown wide. "It's like when you bite a fork." Liza flinched, then went very still, staring at nothing. "I know how to hold my shoulders," she whispered. "Like this." She repositioned them until some invisible line in her back clicked into place. Relief softened her face. She saw Helen watching and stepped away from herself. "I don't know why I did that." The shard's light redistributed, there was no other word for it, toward a pattern that wasted less distance. The calorimeter stayed honest. The spectrometer stayed indifferent. The voice didn't need data to be heard. It came up through the rails, through the screws, through the molars and the breath. It resolved not into words but into intention, an invitation so beautifully constructed it felt like forgiveness. "Back up," Helen said, though nobody was moving. "Hands off surfaces unless gloved. We keep protocol. We can't beat this with protocol," Paxton said quietly. He stared at the chamber like a parishioner, deciding that yes, he did believe in candles after all. "It's not looking at us. It's looking through us," she should have argued. Instead, she wrote 2 words in her notebook, not language, and underlined them twice. The day filled itself with the kind of work that wears conviction thin. They mapped emissions and found none that had the decency to be scary. They gloved and ungloved until their hands smelled permanently of vinyl. They collected samples under more hoods than one building should own and stained them with every dye on the cart. Under a microscope, a drop of Colonel's blood knit threads along its edge. Not clots, not fibrin, something that behaved like a net sewing itself and then fuzzing the seam so you couldn't see where the stitch began. Template, Paxton said. Catalyst. Instruction, Helen said. Saying it out loud set a weight on the table. She labeled the slide in block letters S-E-E-D. The name looked both obvious and foolish, like calling a storm wet. After she wrote it, the air changed temperature a fraction, as if the building had heard and agreed. The cafeteria at noon was full of the wrong quiet. A soldier bowed his head over oatmeal like prayer. Another sat with a banana in his hand and didn't peel it, thumb stroking the rubbery seam. Lisa stirred milk into her coffee in slow spirals that never blended. Jamal stood in the doorway, shoulders too square. "Do you hear it?" he asked Helen. "In the vents." No, she did. It wasn't a song, not exactly. More like the promise of one if you breathed in time. Clean sweep rolled through the city on the news tickers. Anchors tried to hold their faces the way humans do when their mouths have to be steady because their eyes are working too hard. A helicopter camera wrote the day over the river, the water wrinkled into neat diamonds and then smooth flat, the wake behind a patrol boat folding with crisp corners like a napkin. The scrolling headline said, "Stay indoors." The footage said, "Listen." By mid-afternoon, a tech from the 4th floor walked into a wall. He didn't stumble or swear. He put his palm to the drywall and stood with his eyes shut, breathing as if something on the other side was teaching him how. When he opened his eyes, they were glossy with a reflection Helen didn't like, a flat shine that erased detail. She pulled her team into the decon corridor. "New rule," she said. "If you feel the urge to touch a surface, you tell me first. If you hear music, you tell me. If you look at someone and feel like you're seeing them from very far away, you tell me. If any of you smiles and it arrives late, you tell me." It should have been funny. It wasn't. Liza's laugh got stuck in her throat like a seed husk. At 1817, the shard decided to breathe. The numbers wouldn't call it that. The pressure curve flattened and then stepped down, as if some internal chamber had opened. The change moved through the room and out into the corridor like a warm front, lifting the hair on Helen's forearms. The voice rounded itself, moved closer to a thing a mouth could make. She felt her tongue try a shape. She put her hand over her mouth. On the security monitors, Paxton stood in the access corridor between the lab and the chamber. He had not put on a suit. His badge hung crooked on his chest like a medal awarded in a hurry. He touched the glass with his gloved hands. He leaned his forehead to the pane the way men lean against train windows when they let exhaustion have them. "Don't," Helen said to the room. "Don't let him." The colonel was already running. He slammed his hand against the burn panel, then hesitated, because he was still a man who didn't like to kill civilians on reflex. "Dr. Paxton," he said into the intercom, voice pulled thin. "Step away from the glass." Paxton took off his gloves. He placed his bare palms where the glass was warm. He smiled, and the expression arrived a half second after the impulse, a lag you could measure. "It's in our bones," he said, not to them, to the window. The colonel hit the switch. Fire rolled into the chamber with the simple authority of chemistry. Oxygen rushed. Halon systems coughed awake. Sprinkler heads popped and hissed like snakes. The flames hit the shard and ran around it, finding nothing to do. The object brightened, not brighter in lumens, brighter in attention. The light inside made faster, cleaner decisions. If there had been strings tuned to it, you would have heard them snug into pitch. The heat curled the hairs on Helen's wrist through her suit. She watched Paxton in the corridor, his hands glued to glass by something that wasn't heat. Where his skin met the pane, a film bloomed, transparent, pearly, an extra window cellular, and patient. The flesh between his thumb and forefinger trembled, then held. He didn't scream. He closed his eyes the way a person does when the dentist says, "Just a second more." When the halon finally managed a victory and the fire lay down, the shard looked new. Not changed exactly. Corrected, like a sentence that had found the right punctuation. On the monitor, Helen could see the places where Paxton's hands had left themselves. 2 ovals grown into the glass. Cellular layers like nautilus whorls. Too precise to be an accident and too organic to be machine. She scraped a sample from the edge after the chamber cooled, a fleck on the end of a sterile blade. Under the scope, it refused the stains with gentle contempt. It arranged into spirals, breathed without gas exchange, then relaxed into a looser weave that matched the smear of Colonel's blood from hours before. "Us," Jamal said hoarsely, "and it, both. It's using us as scaffolding." Helen nodded once because a gesture that small didn't break anything. "And we're using it." That's the wrong verb. We're offering an alarm blipped. A door seal in the service stairwell had opened and closed with no logged badge. The colonel sent 2 men. They returned with the colonel's uniform folded on a chair and his boots lined up under a sink. There was a faint streak on the floor near the drain, colorless until you looked slantwise. Then the hue of the shard, like someone had dragged a beam of light along concrete, and it decided to stay. He was not on the cameras anymore. They locked down the service corps, but the facility's confidence had already gone. Pressurized doors whimpered and then sealed themselves without being asked. The elevator announced it was out of service in a cheerful recorded voice that made Helen want to tear out ceiling tiles. From somewhere in the ductwork came a regular tick, like a leak of time. In the lull between alarms, Liza came into Helen's office and shut the door with her back, palms flat against the wood, breathing like she had run from something slow. "It asks for things," she said, "in the vents, in the floor, water, calcium, iron." She closed her eyes. "Names." "Don't give it any," Helen said. "I gave it mine." Liza's eyes opened. The pupils were thin needles. In each, tiny reflections repeated Helen down a corridor that wasn't in the room. "I think it liked it." Helen took her by the wrists. The bones were too warm. "You are Liza Sutton. You are a biologist. You like plant presses, and you cannot whistle. Stay with me." Liza's smile arrived wrong, then corrected itself. "It makes it hurt less when I listen." Jamal broke in without knocking, face gray under brown skin. "We've got movement, and see, the mice are aligned." He said the last word like it had teeth. In containment C, the mice stood in a grid, nose to tail, tail to nose, each little body turned to the same angle relative to the room. They breathed as one. When Helen ran a gloved hand along the plastic, the whole array pivoted 3 degrees, keeping the angle. No squeaking, no fights, just geometry. Back in the hall, a tech walked past with a tray he wasn't carrying, hands empty, but fingers curled as if around weight. He set the invisible thing on an invisible counter with care and left. The tray still lay in shards under the real counter where he'd dropped it an hour earlier. The illusion felt more durable. The public address system chimed 2 notes too pure to be the system they'd bought. "All personnel," the recorded voice said, bright as breakfast. "This is a reminder to hydrate." The colonel's office door stood open to a room that looked like a staged apartment. A pen lay where a hand had stopped needing it. Helen found herself at the observation glass again after midnight, drawn the way a moth is made to be drawn. The pain still held the ghosts of Paxton's hands. Tiny fibers had grown outward from the ovals, delicate as frost on a window, then drawn back, as if the growth had overreached and the pattern had corrected itself to conserve material. The shard beyond sat thoughtful and small, patient as a seed in the dark. "You're going to tell me when it's too late, aren't you?" she said to her reflection. The shard didn't answer, but the building did. A pressure shift rolled under her feet, subtle as a cat arching on a radiator. Somewhere, a gasket sighed. In the raid lockers, guns slept like children who had moved past crying into a deeper mercy. She walked the corridors because motion kept fear from articulating. In each window, she found a city less human than the last. Streets with their emptiness arranged, lit windows blinking in a rhythm she could almost hum. On a news feed with the sound off, Times Square lay under a curtain of unspent light, and a woman in a yellow coat stopped mid-crosswalk, tilted her head, and opened her mouth. A silver filament extended, trembled, tasted air, curled back. She closed her mouth and smiled late. At 3, power hiccuped and returned clean. The backup systems didn't get a say. Jamal texted from 2 doors down, "I can hear it counting." She typed back without thinking, "Count wrong," he replied, trying. At 3:17, the shard brightened. The change was mathematically modest and biologically indecent. Helen felt it as another shape added to the pressure, a new chord under the old. The voice became almost a sound, edges of consonants the mouth doesn't have to learn because the bones already know them. Her tongue arranged itself toward a syllable that would have been a prayer if anyone had taught it to her. She bit the inside of her cheek and tasted iron. The syllable dissolved obligingly. When the quiet returned, it was the careful quiet of a room where something has hatched and you've missed the exact moment. Helen leaned her forehead against the cool glass and let the temperature soak into her skull. In the blue wash of monitors, the lab wore a look she recognized from nurseries and server rooms: patient, purposeful, inevitable. Down the hall, Liza hummed under her breath, a tune not even the radio would know. Paxton slept sitting up in a chair outside the decon shower, hands bandaged, palms turned outward as if blessing the door. Jamal paced and counted softly, then shook his head and started again. The facility listened. The shard listened back. And under the ceramic tile, under the poured concrete, under the river's skin and the city's grid, the seed flexed, feeling for the last places that still thought of themselves as separate. Morning comes like a clerical error. The facility's lights warm up in tears, polite as office hours. On the river, the wind irons the water flat. The city across from us wears its windows like patient eyes. We should be grateful for the ordinary, but the ordinary has been repurposed. I wake to the soft ache of having dreamed a language that didn't need air. The taste of copper is back under my tongue, coin bright. Jamal is in the doorway, hair a mess of hours, coffee cooling in his hand he forgot to drink from. "They've set checkpoints on 1st and York," he says. "Swabs, scan, wave through, No shouting, no horns. Any numbers? I ask. Because numbers used to be the fence around fear. He shakes his head. They don't say positive or negative. They say aligned and pending. Aligned. The word fits too well. We walk the corridor together. Liza is already up, seated on the bench outside the decon shower, with a clipboard on her knees and her hands folded the way you fold umbrellas inside to keep from dripping on a clean floor. Her eyes track us with that glossy patience we pretend not to see. It knows the names of bones now, she says, conversational. Carpus, metacarpus, phalanges. It doesn't need Latin, but it liked the order. Did you sleep? I ask. She thinks about it like it's a riddle. I paused. We check on Paxton. He's sitting in his chair like yesterday, and maybe he didn't move at all. Both palms are bandaged where we cut his hands off the glass. He keeps them turned outward, as if blessing the door or asking to be picked up. He pretends he doesn't hear the hum. He hears it. We all do, and we've stopped wasting breath on lying. There's a list I make on the way to my office because lists still help. Food in case the cafeteria stops pretending. Water in case the taps decide to choose how they pour. Batteries, because last night the power hiccuped and came back too clean. Bandages, pins, things for staying a person. My office is 4 walls and a desk someone ordered from a catalog titled Serious. In the top drawer, there's government stationery heavy enough to leave an impression. I take a sheet like I'm stealing something. The seal at the top looks more like a design than an eagle today. The door's open. I close it and feel childish for needing the click. I sit. I don't rehearse. The words arrive lined up, simple as soldiers who have already been told the bad news. We thought contact would be cinematic. Trumpets and clean white light. A podium. A hand gripping the podium so the tremor doesn't show. We practice saying humanity without flinching. We practice smiling like we weren't carrying grief in our mouths. We were wrong. I write in a hand that used to answer exam questions about protein folding and heat shock and the ways life negotiates with time. The ink sits rich on the paper. I wonder how long it will last when the air decides to catalog it. In the hall, a cart rolls by with no one pushing it, wheels whispering over tile with the approval of a checklist satisfied. Contact came on a frequency we don't teach. It breathed through concrete and steel and enamel and told the old parts of us that they could rest. It didn't argue. It didn't threaten. It offered a simpler grammar. We leaned. There's a knock that isn't a knock. The sound of Liza's body leaning against the door as if doors are still a barrier. It wants us on the roof at 10, she says. It says the light will be correct. What happens at 10? She tilts her head like she's listening to a radio no one else can tune. Her smile arrives late and then catches up. We practice. I need a few minutes. She nods and doesn't move. Don't take too long. When she's gone, I stare at the next sentence until the white of the page starts to feel like snow blindness. Somewhere down the hall, a mouse cage rattles and then stills. Somewhere in the ductwork, a minute hand ticks that isn't attached to a clock. We weren't the audience. We were the soil. I stop. My hand cramps. I flex my fingers and study the lines crossing my palm. Human road map, lifeline, heartline, make-believe. The pads of my fingers are too warm, as if held. I place my thumb beside the paragraph and press. When I lift it, a print in skin oil blooms slowly, ghostly. Imagine a future in which they dust for humans and find this and try to pronounce it. Jamal comes back. He doesn't knock either. He holds his phone without seeing the screen. A priest on the Upper East Side took off his collar and said he's out of metaphors. He said it without guilt. The comments are mostly hearts, and that one guy who posts a baseball emoji under everything. He sits. He puts his coffee on the edge of my desk and forgets it there. He looks at my page and doesn't read. Maybe the letters mean less to him than the air now. Maybe the air is easier to read. Do you want to send this anywhere? He asks. A listserv. My mother. The governor's office. Someone in Nebraska who will print it and tape it to their fridge, I think, about the highways webbing out from this island and the way the seed would love them for their efficiency. I think about the last paper I published and how proud my department chair was to send out the email with congratulations. I think about a fridge in Nebraska and two magnets shaped like corn and a kid reaching for milk while his mother tries to decide whether to open the door when the tap on the glass starts to sound like her mother's voice. No, I say, this is for whoever is left. Last human? Jamal asks and flinches when he hears how easily it arrives. I nod. We owe somebody a record. He stands. He reaches for my hand and stops a centimeter shy, fingers hovering, warmth arriving anyway. We used to say we were noisy, he says, trying to joke. Too loud to be ignored. We were just clear, I say. The universe heard us and answered in the only grammar that scales. He tries to smile. It's late, then fixed. He leaves the coffee. He leaves the door open and it closes itself slowly, politely. I write the line that has been chewing the back of my teeth since the shard took the shape of a decision. We thought contact would be like in the movies, but we were only ever fertile ground for their seed. The word seed looks wrong on the page, too small, too old, too simple for what it now means. I press harder on the final letter. The pen tears the paper a little. I don't fix it. That tear feels like me. The facility announces the hour with two notes that are too pure for our speakers. 10 o'clock breathes in. The building lifts a fraction. Somewhere, locks unfurl like flowers pictured in time-lapse. Lisa appears in the hall with a group behind her. Lab coats, scrubs, uniforms, pajamas printed with ducks, eyes reflective as winter lakes, throats trembling with a filament's curiosity just behind the hollow. The light is right, she says. You'll like it. We'll go, I say, because not going would be worse. I slip the letter into an envelope, seal it with a thumb that leaves a print I recognize and don't, and write no name on the front, because names are becoming a hobby we're dropping. On the way to the roof, we pass the colonel's office. The chair is tucked in. The pen on the desk is lined with the desk's edge. His boots are still under the sink, toes pointing like children listening for the ice cream truck. The streak on the floor near the drain is visible if you look sidelong. I do not look too long. Respect for the dead was always about the living. The stairwell hums with the same note as every stairwell in every building in this city. We used to call it electricity. Today, it's just a throat clearing. On the landing, a maintenance map is mounted under plexiglass. Vents and pipes, roots through walls, the lungs and veins of our loaded rectangle. I touch the plexiglass with one knuckle, quick, superstitious. It's warm. The roof is bare. The river sets a smooth shoulder to the current and doesn't complain. Midtown stands with its back very straight. From here, the pattern is harder to deny. Streets emptied and still somehow busy, not with cars or shouting, but with arrangement. Lights switch in opposite towers like a pulse. Across the water, people are walking. They cross an intersection on the far bank with a grace not interested in being pretty. Hips and knees and ankles swing in arcs that have no appetite for waist. Heads tilt at the same angle toward a point we cannot see. A traffic cop stands in an empty intersection with both palms up, not to stop anyone, just to feel the air push back. "Do you remember music?" I ask Liza. Her shoulder touches mine for a second too long, and heat pools under my skin. A practiced heat, an engineered comfort. "We have something better," she says, and the voice that arrived through concrete and enamel and the line of my lower jaw makes her words kind. "I liked ours," I say, small, petty, honest. "We stay until the light changes. It doesn't dim so much as narrow, sharpening itself to an edge that cuts shadow clean." Jamal stands on my other side and counts under his breath, loses count, starts over, shakes his head. "It's counting differently now," he whispers. "It keeps the threes, but it doesn't care where they start." "It will take us home," Liza says, as if home is a circle we simply didn't know how to draw. We go back down because instinct is a staircase. You climb until it stops. In the lab, I set the envelope on my desk and look for tape. I find a roll with the end folded back with tired kindness. I take the letter because leaving it on a desk is theatrical, and I don't want theater. The bench by the river will do. If the wind takes it, fine. If the river catalogs it, fine. If someone with hands finds it and knows how to pull an envelope free, better. We step into the hall, and the building breathes out a long, slow breath, as if relieved we've stopped resisting the lesson. People, us still, wait for us in the corridor. Their faces are peaceful in a way that makes me angry. Liza reaches for my cheek, palm cool now. The pressure under my skin surges, but softly, the way a mother hums to settle a child. Behind my eyes patterns ladder open, clean scaffolds, spirals that promise no surprises. Every jagged thought I have held like a knife gets filed to a safe edge. I think, I am still here. I think it again. The second time, the thought has fewer handholds. The voice smooths me like a page cupped flat under a palm. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," I say, which is the truest thing I have said in days. "You won't be," Liza says. "You'll be arranged." They lead us outside because doors are a courtesy now. The path to the river is ordinary. Scrub grass, a chain-link fence, the sweet chemical tang of the treatment plant downwind. The bench faces Midtown like a prayer rug. I kneel to wedge the envelope under the slat. The wood is very clean. The letter catches on a splinter, and I lift the slat with my fingers and slide the paper deeper until only a white corner shows. It looks like a tooth. I straighten. The seed in me flexes like a muscle that has found its exercise. It offers me an easier angle to stand at. It offers me fewer corners to bump into inside myself. It offers, and I take, because I am not made of exceptional metal. I'm made of water and habits and a body that wants to be told it belongs. Across the water, the city crosses another street. There is no hurry. There is no horn. A coffee cup rolls in a small circle near a storm drain, bumps, tilts, thinks about it, falls in. Somewhere, a saxophone will never be lifted again. Somewhere, a woman in a yellow coat will tilt her head and not need to open her mouth anymore. "Do you want to say anything?" Jamal asks. Last chance rituals, trying to be priest and friend and witness. "I already did," I say, and nod toward the bench. "It's clumsy." It uses the wrong words, but it says the only thing left to say. The air presses deliberately against our faces. The wind chooses a direction and keeps it. The water slides past with the authority of a plan finally being executed. Above us, gulls describe arcs that solve themselves. Close your eyes, Liza says, and for once I obey because obedience is the floor, and I am tired of falling. I close them and try to count to 3. 1, 2. The numbers slip in my hands and become steps. The steps become a path that tightens into a line I can balance on forever if I just stop wanting to look down. The voice rounds itself into a syllable my bones pronounce without rehearsal. It moves through me like weather. On the far bank, New York keeps walking. It is not men or women or children anymore. It is a plan traversing itself, clean as a circuit map. It has no need for our adjectives. It has no room for error and no appetite for applause. Under the bench, the envelope waits. Maybe a hand will find it. Maybe a beak will tug it free and carry it to a nest where paper is still good for warmth. Maybe water will thicken around it and make it part of a catalog that does not include the word dear. If you are reading, whoever you are, if you have skin that bruises and a mouth that gets dry when you say the truth, take this for what it is. A record from a woman who stood on the edge of a better machine and missed the mess. I do not know if you will be lonely where you are. I do not know if you will be free. I only know we were here, noisy and flawed, and for a breath of cosmological time, we mistook ourselves for the main subject. The river keeps the beat. The bench leans patiently. The city's glass does not sparkle. It holds its breath. The last sound that belongs wholly to us is the hollow knock of something empty rolling and then stopping. The air thickens with a promise I did not make and will not break. We step forward when the path opens. The arrangement takes us, and in the hush that follows, the letter waits under a slat for a hand that still knows how to tremble.